Every collector has their favorite combiner release. Not necessarily their favorite combiner in fiction, but most certainly in plastic form. Well, that is, unless they've had the misfortune of not being able to get one yet, and for that I am truly sorry. But for the most part, everyone has that combiner that they gravitate to more than any other. Maybe it's a classic from G1, perhaps it's a weird Legion class thing, or it could even be one of the Combiner Wars releases. For me, it's easy. Magic Square Menasor is by far the most well-rounded release I've ever come across. Every single element has love and care poured into it, from paint to engineering to design to loadout options. It excels in every category. The only thing I can really criticize it for, excluding minor nitpicks here and there, is the fact that later releases unfortunately skimped on the quality control, which has led to many a collector not experiencing the brilliance I was able to. It's a real shame, but it does nothing to hinder my love for this thing. But how do you follow something like this up? How do you go beyond the sheer brilliance of the perfect Menasor? Well, apparently not with Devastator, according to many Magic Square fans. I don't really have a say in this as I've not handled one myself, but everyone I talk to has a laundry list of issues. Even people who like it. Poor plastic, abysmal engineering, lacking stability. For as many problems as I have with the New Age version, it seems I would have made the right choice picking that outing. Suffice to say, Menasor still sadly remains undefeated. However, a new challenger has recently approached. I'm honestly surprised no one has tackled a Bruticus sooner. The Iron Factory one has been, for a long time, reasonably outdated. There were talks of a Zeta version for a long time, but those seem to have fallen through the cracks since Hasbro brought the Hammer of the Law down on them. I think it's a good thing we were spared such. Did anyone really want a Bruticus on the same level as Superatron Mini? Didn't think so. But now, beyond all that, we finally have Magic Square's third attempt to make Lightning Strike twice. Can we reach those same heights? Can we discover the same secret brilliance within? Greetings, Cybertronians. I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to Magic Square's Legend Scale Bruticus. Interesting they didn't include a combination name, though I suppose they didn't either for their last two combiners anyway. Oh well, not like it actually matters. I don't tend to go by their third-party names regardless, so here's what they're technically called on the box, and from here we're gonna call them by their G1 names. Cool? Cool. Ugh, I always have difficulty with this part. I can never decide which order to cover combiners in, because there's numbering order, then there's release order, then there's the order you got them in. I think I'm just gonna go for that last one, so I can recount some of my experiences in completing the sets. This will mean that things go a bit fucky-wucky, but yeah, my show, my rules, and lack of consistency. Guess that starts us off with Brawl, who was originally just a curiosity. See, I just come off the back of a wonderful Menasor, and a realization that they weren't taking many lessons from that combiner. Shockwave, overcomplicated and poorly built. Soundwave, overcomplicated and poorly built. Devastator, allegedly the same, though I haven't bought one, so I can't say. It was a little sad knowing that they could have done something amazing, but they were so insistent on their panel fuckery ways. Then, however, I saw their Brawl. I was intrigued, to say the least. It seemed complicated, but not in a bullshit, oh my god, make it stop way. And although it was difficult to tell in photography, the plastic looked better too. So I figured, what the hell, worst comes to worst, I just skip the rest and make a funny video that pisses off all Magic Square fans. Apparently I'm the Bobby Skullface of Legends reviewing, according to multiple MS stands. I don't know how to feel about that comparison. So 2023 opened up with this fine fellow as a somewhat late birthday present. If my aunt is watching this, thank you. She probably isn't, but who knows. And upon receiving him, blimey, this is bloody good. It's not the most amazing thing I've ever come across, but the set is off to a very strong start. The tank mode looks absolutely gorgeous, super compact, and excellently greebled. It's wonderfully proportioned with a long, thin body and a nice compact turret. I've seen complaints that it's not accurate to any existing tank, toon, toy, or actual model, so apparently it's the worst thing ever in some circles. I don't even know if that last one is true. I'm not a vehicle person, so no idea. To me, it's a tank, and it looks quite lovely. I love how boxy the front is. It's a good way to hide a lot of the robot mode Kibble, as well as the combiner joints. Apparently on the upscaled version, this panel is really difficult to pull open, but thankfully on the original, I haven't experienced any issues. Oh, right, for those who've never seen this figure before, that tidbit won't make sense. Don't worry, I'll explain later, you'll find out. The armoring around is pretty consistent, no weird hollow bits or hinges, though it has been 6 years since the last Bruticus, so it makes sense that things would have improved. The one visible hinge you do see on the side blends in exceptionally well, and even if it didn't, I mean, you know. I love how clean the treads are. The seams on these are pretty low, which is nuts considering how complex the leg transformation is. I do kinda wish they had more paint beyond the stone grey, but this guy's going for a more toon-accurate approach, even in his toy loadout, so it makes sense. Oh, right, another thing that needs explaining later. Technically, each of these have different styles, but I'll get into that when it actually comes into the equation. Might be a bit though. The back section is dense as fuck, with so many panels folding together, expertly hidden by greebles galore. It's perhaps a little more complicated than it needs to be, but it works for the scale. You do get a bit of junk at the back, but aside from the usual excuse, again, they have to have a combiner joint in there, so honestly, it's fine. I also love the turret on top. It's appropriately chunky while still bringing some awesome angling into the mix. It's everything I wish the Iron Factory version had been. In fact, overall, I think this is an improvement on that old tank mode in every way, save for maybe the colors. But maybe that's something they can eventually fix with their C-designated reissues, though that's a whole other can of worms. That aside, I love the little details like the extra guns on the sides, picked out in a different shade. The light's also done insanely well, particularly in the face of difficulty doing yellow. It's just a wonderful aesthetic choice, and probably my favorite bit with the turrets. You can remove them if you want, as they are technically accessories, but why would you? They look fantastic. For other accessories, you get the G1 toy-styled back cannons. They're alright, I suppose, if a bit difficult to tab in due to how the tabs function in relation to the engineering. I would have liked an extra swivel to allow you to move them from side to side, but that isn't accurate to the G1 toy, so I see why they didn't bother. The Masterpiece scale version didn't have it either, which is less understandable. You can also store the gun on the top of the tank, and it doesn't look terrible. It's probably the best example of weapon storage on all of these Combaticons, which is slightly disappointing. What's not disappointing is the plastic, which they finally fixed. Kinda. It's less knockoff grade and more similar to what the early red figures used, before it all went to shit. I am glad they're taking strides to fix their materials, but I still think they should move away from these. They feel awful and are super prone to scratching when converting. Also, they can advertise durability and claim it fixes the tolerances. I'm not saying tolerances are easy to do. What I am saying is that I don't think it's a valid excuse. And if that is the excuse nonetheless, they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater by insisting on compromising the feel of the figure. It does feel denser, it does feel more premium, it is an improvement on previous plastic choices. It's just also not at the level it should be. There's definitely worse plastics on the market, and worse figures they've released that use far cheaper materials. But this is still inexcusable. It's cutting off their nose to spite their face, and I'm going to call that out. But on the whole, it's still a lovely tank mode. It's nice, compact, dense, well-detailed, reasonably painted, and it feels like Brawl, instead of something that looks like Overlord pancaked it. It's a nice balance between realism and sunboism, and I really like that balance. And, can I point out something that has me unreasonably excited? They've cut back on the use of trapezoidal tabs. Yes! Thank you! They're still here, sure, but on the entire set, their usage has been drastically diminished. Thank you! God, having to go through this shit over and over and being called crazy for disliking it because it's useful. This feels incredibly vindicating. Much like the plastic, it's not entirely there yet, but it steps in the right direction, and I really appreciate that. Anyway, moving on, Onslaught definitely shifts the balance closer to the Toon style, but also he doesn't? Proportionally, things are closer to how he looked in the Sunbow cartoon, but then the front of the truck is far more toy accurate. It's weird, not many companies have gone for full Sunbow accurate proportions. Really, it's just god damn it! And these colors, I'm not sure where they came from. Both of the first two versions use this deco, and it's not taken from the Toon toy or IDW comics. It's close to the original toy, but it is a lot lighter. If they really wanted to be toy accurate, they'd have gone with the shade Iron Factory used. That's not just me preferring that shade overall, it's just closer to what Onslaught is. But we have what we have now, and what we have is quite lovely. It's a wonderful elongated murder truck, and like barbecue ribs, it's low and slow in the best of ways. It cleans up immensely well, using its hard angles and carefully placed panels to great effect. The extra hatch details on the side bring some much needed life to the exterior, and the wheels are wonderful with their extra paint. I do think the top could use some more greebling, especially towards the turret section, but it's still pretty nice. I love the front section of the truck, with its squinting windows and super flat nose section. I think it's really cool how it angles out of the wheel arches on the side, so you can see the light housing peeking through. It's actually brought about from how the engineering works, and I think it's a great way to do the whole thing. The paint on the grille is also lovely, with the extra light grey around the bumper encasing the whole thing. Be aware though, this paint application is exclusive to the Toon Star version, something I'll, again, get to later. The turret on the top is also gorgeous, hovering just slightly above everything, but still feeling super cohesive. I kinda like that they went with the Toon style super thin guns. It's not something we see very often, but it makes this whole assembly feel way more precise. Onslaught doesn't need to use excessive force. He's a professional. He knows what he's doing. You can also move it up a bit for some extra rotation, and I absolutely love this feature. It really brings the whole alt mode together, adding that extra layer of functionality and making this truck do some pretty cool things. It's a good thing this truck does things, of course, because that brings me to my biggest gripe. barely any carrying functionality. The trailer is long, but not quite long enough. Brawl barely fits, and even then he feels really out of place, and everyone else? Nope. It technically works, but definitely not visually. This really needed a couple more centimeters. I reckon it could have worked if they included the classic G1 back of the leg Kibble style flip over. These are already engineered wonderfully, but just a bit more length would have worked wonders. Though, admittedly, I do acknowledge my own hypocrisy for not caring if Ultra Magnus can carry cars, but being very annoyed when Onslaught can't. But in my defense, truck carrying a space shuttle. Come on, that's a bit different than an open-air carrier for bog standard cars. That's really my only gripe with this vehicle though. Well, that and the shitty weapon storage, but it's fine, you can just ignore it. Everything else works really well. Sure, the color choice is odd, but it's still decent in a vacuum. It still represents the team quite well and gives you the perfect vibe of Onslaught. It's still a nice truck to behold in the palm of your hand, which is more than I can say for Swindle. God damn, Swindle is just so boring. Like, there is basically nothing to latch onto. This is Sunbow over-accuracy to the absolute extreme. And they succeeded. I kinda hate how they succeeded. With the exception of how long the back of the truck is, being the one part they decided to go more realistic on, this is the screen model ripped right off the cell, in a lineup that makes approximations so that everything can remain more realistic. Look, I realize that this is a me thing in terms of not liking obsessive toon accuracy. For me, if something is toon accurate, there needs to be a balance of other elements that I enjoy, such as engineering or paintwork. Now, beyond the fact that this does neither, that's not what the rest are going for. The remaining members are way more grounded in vehicle mode. Save for Blastoff, but even that elongates the design way more than this thing does. Plus, beyond that, this one is supposed to be the IDW style version, or I guess toy style, which again, I'll get into later. There's the opportunity to add extra paint, especially on the grille at the front, but none of those opportunities were taken. The purple on the bonnet is absolutely gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but everything below it just lacks sauce. The black bull bar should go hard, but amidst this sea of sand, it just doesn't do anything. The wheel arches are also kinda weedy, and the seating section is weak as piss. So honestly, I'm okay with this part given, you know. Plus in general, it is kinda difficult to engineer a proper seating section. So if anywhere deserves some slack, it's here. Really don't like the way the back comes together though. Everything here should function, but they've sort of half-assed the accuracy on the beds. It's supposed to represent these two squares on the screen model, but thanks to how the legs function, they've been elongated, leaving the bed flat and flavorless as a packeted jaffle. And considering how much engineering they've crammed into this thing, it just wasn't worth it. I would have much preferred Swindle followed the style of the other vehicle modes. While he doesn't look out of place, he does appear more undercooked than the other members. They couldn't even get the accessories right. Much like Brawl, they attempt to go for the toy style back turrets, only they got cold feet with the bazooka. What is this supposed to be? What is this skimpy ass thing? This isn't a bazooka. Iron Factories was a bazooka. This is barely a pea shooter. Can't even use accuracy as an excuse because the original toy went way harder than this. Admittedly, it does look a smidge better scaled up on the Masterpiece release, but even then, it's far too small. At least you get a removable spare tire. Would have been nice if it was engineered into the main body itself, like Jeep Bumblebee, but I guess it's a nice accessory to have. I don't like this alt mode. I don't hate it, but it's just sourceless. And yes, a lot of that comes down to screen accuracy. But to take this far a pivot on this particular vehicle mode, I just don't see the justification. This all especially comes to play when you consider the absolute nightmare it takes to get here. On the whole, this set ranges from being reasonably well engineered to, oh my god, this is f***ing amazing, but Swindle, well, let's just say I'm dreading the conversion section after this. Fortunately, the next member I received did things a lot better. Blastoff is also very toon accurate, but I think the visual interest allows him to wear it much sexier. They've got the patchwork purple on the side, which is emblematic of the screen model, but in these new proportions, you really see a lot more purple shining through, and I think it's really beneficial to the figure overall. Really, you have the toon colors draped over the realistic shuttle detail and proportions, and it really works. The nose is appropriately sharp, while still rounding off the edges quite well, and it brings the mass together exceptionally. Both shades of brown are luscious, the darker shade a little more so, but the mint stone also doing reasonably well. Even the dark stone grey underside is gorgeous, just absolutely lovely. Now, due to the transformation, he is a bit patchworky. There are a lot of panels that come together on this thing, and it really shows. But honestly, I think that helps create that extra level of flair, so it doesn't end up being a boring chunk of grey. It's as if he was constructed out of extra bits of metal, which he sorta was considering how the G1 Combaticons were brought online. They've clearly put a lot of thought into the color layout of this thing, as it balances very well. In fact, a lot of thought has been put into this thing overall. For some bizarre reason, blast-offs tend to get the short end of the stick with third party, despite the G1 toy being bog standard simple. If they're not dealing with construction issues, they're saddled with poor engineering, wonky sculpts, or both. Allegedly. I don't own any of them, so I can't say for certain. But what I'm seeing here seems to circumvent a lot of that, and I really commend them for it. My gripes are pretty negligible. I don't like the weapon storage, which, boo-hoo, who cares? Just leave it in the box like a normal person. Would have been nice if they made use of this big gaping hole in the roof, though, which is my other main issue. Just, both of these things could have been solved in one fell swoop. So close. The back section is also a little undercooked, a smidge hollow, and there's no secure locking mechanisms on the thrusters. I get that this has to turn into the feet and can't rely on the same tried and true leave it as is method of shuttles in the past, as it has to separate, but I still think a little more tweaking would have really brought this to life. And finally, no clear windows. That's more of a personal thing, and Swindle managed to give us two options for that, so it would have been nice here. Ah well, can't win them all. Still a fantastic shuttle mode, extremely well proportioned and wonderfully painted. He feels a lot bigger than he is because of how they've crafted him, and I think that's pretty neat. Still too big for Onslaught though. Damn, the husbands are kept apart once again. At least he gets his own dedicated launch pad. Oh, right, I should probably cover these extra bits now that they apply to this mode. Magic Square seems to have actually taken some feedback and included a base mode with this figure. And as far as base modes go, it's better, but still not quite there yet. It does make quite a lovely launch pad for blast-off, provided you have the head rotated backwards. I just think, much like the back of the shuttle, it could have used a few more passes to get it perfect. Hands don't contribute anything, for one, and the connections on the torso only half work, as one just won't function with how the tabs are, and I feel some more servos and computer bays folding out would have really sealed the deal, though that would likely have hampered some of the accuracy, so I get why. Maybe the old G1 base mode was the way to go, though obviously that wouldn't have worked with the amount of Kibble forming much of the combined modes. Not quite a full skeleton, but still a substantial amount. In general, I still prefer how Iron Factory handled it, where it formed a much longer trailer, and I think it could have been possible, but I understand why they went this route. Still works pretty well though, and it's a feature I find myself using more often than not. But as for Blastoff himself, he's quite lovely. There's elements that could be better, but I adore the colors, mechanical detail, and vibe he's got going on. He's probably tied for my favorite out of all the alts, along with Onslaught. Definitely could be better with a few minor areas, no Darkwing, not that kind of minor, but it's adorable, and I love it to bits. And I guess that leaves us with Vortex, and he's alright, I guess. Bit of a wet blanket to end on, which is kind of how I felt lining these things up for the first time in vehicle mode, but it's still pretty good. Most of the visual interest is kept up front, with the bulbous heli-cockpit turning this into a flying tadpole. The turquoise stripe is pretty neat, breaking up the monotony of the grey and leading down swishly to the gun at the front. It's really cool how said gun is formed from the barrel of the robot mode blaster. Nice integration, though the rest of it just sort of chills on the side. Feels like they expended all of their really cool weapon storage on Brawl, then just gave up with the rest. The black windows wrapping around look really mean, as do the nice long rotor blades. I really like how these fold out for extra length, while still collapsing for ease of use in robot mode. Too often do you get stuck with the rotor blades getting in the way of the combined mode, but this method works really well. Unfortunately, I got attacked by the QC gremlin and one of them refuses to go completely straight. Kinda like me, so that's a smidge annoying. The toy, not me. Still though, pretty cool. Really, the coolest bits make themselves known up the front, because the back, well, it's not bad, but it's definitely weird. The way the arms fold into the air intakes is admittedly clever, but it also leaves a lot of joints and hinges exposed. It's not hateful, but like many elements, it feels like it could use a once-over. It also feels like they designed the tail this way to compensate for the hollowness, because at times it feels like scaffolding. Not only is it completely hollow under this part here, but there's bits that just feel unfinished. At times it's like he's barely holding everything together. Combined with how fiddly the back section is, constantly flopping around at each light tap, I just think treating this as backpack Kibble instead of having the whole thing folds into the torso would have been a much better idea. Even the vehicle mode enhancers suffer from this wibbliness. You can plug the guns onto the side, and they look really cool. God, I'd love to see more Vortexes do this. But unfortunately they also fall off with minimal pressure applied. Not only that, but they can't stay on during transformation. With something like Swindle's spare tire, I'm disappointed, but I understand why. But these, it really feels like it brings the back of the alt mode together, and it would have been great if they found a way to keep these on. So all in all, Vortex is half a fantastic vehicle mode and half a heavily compromised one. The compromises aren't hateful by any means, especially when you consider the scale we're working at, but they do disappoint a bit when you consider what this could have been. Still, at least it's better than whatever the this was trying to be, though let's be real, that's not hard. As for the team synergy, it's pretty tight. These five look pretty exceptional together. Scaling is a bit weird as it usually is with combiners, but the aesthetics line up quite well and they feel like a team. except for Swindle. He's close, but thanks to his flatness, he feels like he came across some irregularities in the pension funds. Still, in terms of vehicle modes, they're pretty good. I feel it should go without saying, but these blow the Iron Factory vehicles out of the water. Sure, the stylization on those is class as but these are just made at a much higher quality, even taking into account the materials. Though that obviously makes sense because, well, 6 years. God, time flies. I'm going into my 10th year of Transformers reviewing soon. Shit's crazy. Now, for the most part, these are all surprisingly okay with their engineering. Some of them are great, some of them are decent. Really, it's just Swindle that's the problem, as I've alluded to. Most of these are complex, but not too complex. They scale back just enough. So it does seem like Magic Square is learning, even though they already learned with Menasor, and now they've kind of gone back to this. Oh, well, we have what we have, and what we have isn't bad. Brawl especially, I mean, he's surprisingly elegant for what he does. On camera, it's gonna look like he's an absolute nightmare, but everything surprisingly works. First thing you want to do is bring these panels out to the side, which will let you open up everything for later. Bring these panels down to separate them from the arms, like so. That will allow you to separate the legs and just keep them out to the side here, which will allow you to pull up the turret and keep it out of the way so that it doesn't cause any issues with everything else. Separate these torso sections, they unpeg there. And we can do this later, we might as well do the legs first. You want to bring this foot section out and bring this section out. There's then a tiny little panel that pops out there. That could be kind of simplified, but it's still okay. You bring this whole section down like that, fold in this panel here. This whole side section folds in on itself, then in on itself, then around on itself and down on itself. This section opens up, rotates around, and pegs back in. This panel rotates out and rotates out. You want to line this bit up and then push that into place to lock it into place. Make sure this is pushed all the way in if it's fallen out, and you push this down and then slide it up. And then it squishes with the rest of the panels. You can then bring the foot down into place, and that's your leg done. It looks really nightmarish, but in practice, it's actually not that bad. Honestly, surprised. I was expecting it to be a lot worse. Now that that's all done, you rotate the waist around 180 degrees, bring the torso sections down, bring the head up. This panel rotates into the torso twice, the head sits on the top, and the whole thing comes together like so. Make sure the backpack's all the way out because then it'll fold in like so. And last but not least, yoink the arms, rotate them around, open up the fist cavity, bring the fist out and back in, and second verse same as the first, as Emgo would say. I do keep using that phrase, it's sort of a brain rot of mine. And we are done! Genuinely expected this to be a whole lot more difficult, but surprisingly, it's very elegant. It just functions, it just does its thing, and it does its thing very well. Swindle, on the other hand, is exactly as bad as he looks. He is a nightmare. I hate this transformation. It is the one of the sets that I dread doing. Not quite as bad as Vasily, and certainly not as bad as Ragnar, but still pretty awful. You want to untab these side panels here, come to the bottom and start bringing the panels aside, separate the legs, and now we can start seeing the nightmare we're going to get into. Bring these out of the way so we've got a bit of clearance. These panels pop out of the sides of the legs like so. You can start to see the problem here. This shimmies out and rotates downwards like so. Out you go. You can barely see what I'm doing, but you want to rotate this panel down with the bit at the top. Tiny panel rotates inwards on both sides for clearance. Rotates inwards on itself like so, untabs from the sides, shifts up on the sliding rail, sliding rails, and it clips into that panel there that we folded in. On a bigger transformer, this would be very clever, but on this, it just doesn't work. The seat folds inwards on itself, and this sits there, so that this side panel can clip into both that and that. You can see how it works there, and with that there, with the bloody tabs. Rotate the wheel until you reach the right spot so that you can rotate it in on itself. Why is that there when we already have a fake wheel there? You could have used the real wheels, but you insisted on using fake wheels. The foot rotates outwards. These sections clip around this section here, and the toe tilts into place as you rotate the ankle into place. It is not a fun leg transformation at all. I hate this. And it's even worse going into vehicle mode. Going into robot mode is slightly better, but this is just bad. Anyway, you want to take this tiny steering wheel and it slots into the back of that. You bring these panels down from the sides. Same with the front panel, it just folds down. Untab the side bits here and bring this nightmare of engineering together. Who thought this was a good idea? Seriously, who thought this was a good idea? You want to bring the head up and out of the way. Extend the arms so that they have enough clearance to get through these gaps here. here. It feels like you're stressing the plastic every single time. If the head's sunken in, you won't be able to do this, but you have to rotate. You have to rotate the wheels inwards for some bizarre reason. I don't know why they force you to do this. And of course, bring these sections in like so. The grill rotates into here, and these peg into the grill. If they're not pegged in properly, the whole chest won't work. So make sure you give it a nice pegging. No, not that way, but I kind of wish it was that way because it would be better than this transformation. You have these tiny panels here that you have to somehow get up. It's just so bloody difficult. Like, how they expect you to do this without a tool of some sort, I don't know. They always get stuck in there. Okay, I used a tool to do it off screen, but you have to get these tiny little panels up and out of the way to get enough clearance and to fill in the shoulders. This is a Legends figure. Why does it need to fill in the shoulders? That's completely useless. This panel rotates inwards. This all rotates together with these bits on the top. The torso folds in on itself and sits there. It just sort of sits there. Wait, Swindle's face has fallen off. What the f***? I didn't even realize that. I'm gonna have to find that after I finish filming. God, this just sucks. And I lost the face. Hell. Last but not least, you yoink this out. This panel rotates up, fist out, and that rotates in, and it all rotates down together. It's not terrible, but it's still ridiculously over-engineered. Like, I don't get why this needed to be a thing. It's very silly. I don't understand it. And yay, there we have Swindle. Without a face. I'm gonna have to fix that, for fuck's sake. Fortunately, Onslaught is infinitely better. I actually really like transforming this one. He just works really well. He's just really fun. You shove in the guns at the top, and we'll separate these and keep them out of the way so it's easier to get these panels out of the way. These rotate outwards, allowing you to get these out of the way, and then you rotate these to the side so that you can do the same on this side, like so. Separate the legs so we can start playing around with the panels. Inward panel rotates outwards, allowing you to take the outward panel, rotate out the toes and the heel. This panel rotates around to the side, allowing it to fold inwards on itself, and this entire section shimmies upwards. Haven't really seen a Transformer get a shorter vehicle mode like this before, aside from maybe Dark of the Moon Megatron. This will then clip together, this will then clip together, that will then clip together to hold it into place. Extra panel rotates outwards, and the whole thing clips together like so. Very nice and very satisfying leg transformation. Like, goddamn, this did not need to go this hard, and yet it just does. It's a transformation I can keep doing over and over again, and I think it's what actually sold me on this set as a whole. Anyway, you bring up these side skirts that'll allow you to bring out the front skirts and put it back into place. Rotate the waist around. Side panels rotate outwards and inwards with the windows. Top section untabs and rotates back. Inward on itself and inward on itself. This tiny little panel in the middle needs to fold out, otherwise none of this is going to work. You rotate these inwards and in on themselves while you do that, which will allow you to transform the whole thing and collapse the whole torso together. Push these windows in and down, and that will allow you to line everything up, and these will actually peg into the sides as well. Filling out the torso, and then you got that too. The guns actually open up, because actually you take these sections and you rotate them upwards like so. It's a little bit difficult, but then when you bring these together, and you take this double hinge and shift it upwards, it actually lines up with these tabs here. So when you close it up, it makes a nice and sturdy backpack. Last but not least, you bring the arms down, fists into place. Wheel does the same thing as Swindle, where it rotates into place there, but this actually does something really cool. This opens up and it rotates around like so, and when you orient the arm in its right position, you've got the fake wheels from the Sunbow model. That is actually really cool, and that is how Swindle should have done it, although he didn't need fake parts at all. And it leads to just a brilliant transformation on Onslaught. He did not need to go this hard, but he just did. Also, don't forget to push in the knees a little bit because of the way everything's oriented in vehicle mode. Blast Off is also quite lovely. Very panely, way more than Onslaught is, but not in a shit way like Swindle. Everything really functions quite well here. First of all, might as well get these done at the back. You want to push in these two thrusters, invert these thrusters into the foot configuration, and push them back like that. They will lock into place nicely. You want to separate this panel from the top. These bits will rotate under on themselves like so, and then up just a little bit to separate from everything else. That will allow you to take these panels and push them into the sides there, just like so, and then the wings will peg into them like so. You want to separate the legs. Front section opens up. This panel rotates inward on itself, and shuts up again. Seems weirdly complicated, but it's very simple and very satisfying, though you will need to get the foot out of the way for it. Then you do a very similar thing on the back, only you've got trapezoidal tabs, so you will need to finagle a little bit. That folds in on itself, that folds in on itself, and then squishes back into place. Not ideal. I still don't like these trapezoidal tabs, but they still function quite well in this instance. Not the worst case of them I've seen. This section opens up from the top, and this section opens up from the bottom. bottom. That will allow you to bring the arms out of the way. They can rotate down into place, separate them from here. You've got a double hinge here that brings them ever so slightly out. I think it's a little bit overcomplicated. It's not bad, it's just I don't really think it was necessary, all things considered. Open up these cavities, bring out the fist, rotate that in, out the fist, there we go. Seems very complicated, but it's buttery smooth. Then you want to yoink the shoulders out like so, bring out the head. This section untabs from itself and rotates around 180 degrees. This pulls out, these fold in on themselves, that folds in on itself, and it fits over into the backpack. And this section folds in on itself, careful not to get the landing gear in the way, and rotates inwards. These form the scaffolding, then the shoulders lock everything in place like so, and then the head brings it all together. With the butt flap, these bits fold in, folds into the butt, rotates around, and you're good. Blastoff has no right being this fun and this simple, but he really is. He just works in a way he absolutely shouldn't. I kinda love him. And to finish off with Vortex, he's okay. He's got a bit of that Swindle overcomplication, but he pulls back just before it gets unwieldy. It could be a lot worse. First thing you want to do is bring in these sections here, which I think all Vortexes should do going forwards. Then these clip together like so, and the same with these. These also clip together. And of course you remove the weapons. These sections rotate up and around so that they can sit on the shoulders like so. This whole top section will untab to make things a bit easier. Untabs from the arms as well. And this whole section will untab from there and pretty much everywhere really. Separate the legs to get rid of the gun. The gun and the barrel click together very easily with the tab facing downwards. Side panel rotates down like that. This section folds up for later. And you do the reverse of Brawl where it folds outwards and down. And this section also rotates outward. A bit like Onslaught, this section is just gonna fold out there, allowing you to take this whole section out. You start folding out the foot like so, with again a rotation of the toe. It's sort of like the best hits of the other members of the set, but there's too many of them. They could have scaled back, I think. This folds backwards. You want to make sure the tab's out of the way so it can fold all the way down, but then also bring it back so that it can peg into there. Foot comes into place. This panel locks everything in. This folds in, and the foot tabs into the rest. This section rotates in downwards and with the rest of it. And, oh boy, that leg was way over-engineered. Like, we did not need that many steps on this thing, to be quite honest. I get that you want to show off you're really complex. Oh my god, we put so many steps in this thing, but it's a goddamn Legends figure, and I'll get into some of the issues with that later. When it comes to understanding what it's trying to do, yes, I am rather suspicious about what they're actually trying to achieve with this. But it's the kind of thing where it's like, what kind of figure are you really trying to make here? Are you actually trying to make a Legends figure? Is that really your intent? Anyway, there we go. That was way too much. Glad we're pretty much on the last one now. This section rotates into the torso. The whole top section rotates outwards. Top section rotates outwards. Arms untab and fold into place. Turbine rotates upwards, outwards, and downwards, inwards, and upwards. With the fist back into place. One of the actual better parts of using the same space. I don't mind this bit, it looks way more complicated than it is, sort of like Blastoff's arms. But then you gotta deal with everything else. Like this Kibble rotates into place there. These two sections rotate inwards because they're gonna be used later. You wanna bring these two parts out for the torso later. Inward fold, inward fold, inward fold. Same on the other side, like so. And it's supposed to all come together to form a really boring chest, with the backpack clipping it all together. Like, was that really necessary for all of that? That could have been way simpler. Anyway, that sits around and the head pops into place. Arms peg into the tops, and these fold in there. And I guess now that that's all out of the way, if you want to keep it back like that, then you can, which I do. Side note, if you really want to, you can actually put the guns from the vehicle mode on the wrists, and I think that's a really cool aesthetic. I forgot to mention it in the script, but it's a really nice thing to do, and I think I'm going to leave them on for the footage itself. So yeah, the conversions, for the most part, aren't bad. They're just long. Not that long for the 3 best members, but for the other 2, I don't know if it really makes it worth it. Like, I love Blastoff, I love Onslaught, I love Brawl. But Vortex and Swindle, they might sour the experience. Most of it is pretty high, but the lows are so low that they somehow lose their faces. I still don't know how that happened. I'm only just realizing that right now. Oh yeah, also don't forget to fold up Blastoff's little fin in there. I always forget to film something, but in my defense, this is a really long and complicated conversion scheme. Oh well, I'm done with that now. It's not like I have to film it again with another Bruticus after this, right? Right? In robot mode, god damn, these 5 are sexy. They're a lot more tuned than the vehicles would have led you to believe, but they take those designs in some really nice ways to elevate their personalities. Mostly anyway. They're all put through a slight heroic filter. Things are subtly changed for the better, and it leads to some incredibly dynamic sculpts. With Brawl, you can see why I really fell head over heels for the team as a whole, as this guy is swish as fuck. The head sculpt is absolutely gorgeous, with the piercing yellow illuminating the stark grey. The paint is a little messy on my copy, but the careful mean as sculpting more than makes up for it. I really like how it angles out to the sides ever so subtly. It's barely noticeable, but it gives him almost a regal appearance. And this noggin sits atop a monolithic pectoral section, sculpted and painted exquisitely. It's a little wider than the screen model, but I think that actually works really well in his favor. It's wide and tanky, like the movieverse version of Speech, funnily enough. Also, just realizing where they got the idea to stick the spikes on the nipples. That's kinda neat. The arms are a smidge simple, going for the full Sunbow look. And this is probably why the treads in vehicle mode were left so plain. They work okay, though they tend to get stuck on the rhomboid mass due to the rather big tread protrusions. The thigh and waist are also a bit simple, but the legs go insanely hard. From the fronts, they have some really nice militaristic greebling, and then you get the tread sweeping back on the sides, and he just ends up looking gorgeous. The way these are designed makes it look like he's schmoovin' in any pose. Sculpting and silhouetting like this always brings posing to life. Not that he really needs it. The articulation is honestly great. Sure, there's no butterfly joint, but basically everything else is here, right down to the ab crunch. It's a massive step above the last combiner of theirs I took a look at, and it really shows an improvement in the playability department. I can't really think of much to complain about. There's weirdness, like the entire inside of the legs being grey to match the screen model, which seems a little excessive, but it's still decent on its own merits. Really, I only have 3 main gripes. For one, he's a smidge lacking in the ankles. Posing for the most part works well enough, but sometimes it's a bit noticeable. Secondly, the sides of the legs experience a few waffles. This isn't because of budgeting. Due to how the whole thing compresses and twists and turns, he needs slots for the tabs to go into. Lots of slots. Fortunately, this was fixed on the Masterpiece scale version, but at this scale, it's fine. And finally, the midriff armor isn't glued on. Maybe it's just on my copy, but for fuck's sake, if something's gonna be plugged in, use glue, goddammit! It's not that hard. Honestly, Brawl is quite lovely. He could have so easily been an overcomplicated mess, and at times he does teeter a bit close to that. But for the most part, he's a blast in all 3 modes. Honestly, I don't know if I really need another Legend Scale Brawl after this. With other members of this set, I could go either way, but with Brawl, he's just brilliant. There are things I wish they could have done, such as a deeper green and maybe some better integration of the vehicle mode accessories into robot mode, but for the former, that just isn't what it's trying to do, and for the latter, it's fine. It's not like it's the entire top section of the vehicle mode, unlike, say, Iron Factory Swindle. In the end, great vehicle mode, intriguing transformation, killer robot, all around, very nice Brawl. What can I say? Me likey. Onslaught continues a lot of the same ideas Brawl put down, though a lot of his deco betrays him. Yeah, the inaccurate turquoise they chose is fine, but I can't help but feel a darker shade like the Toon or toy would have served this design a lot better. Still, he's pretty good in this mode. The head sculpt is a vast improvement over the Iron Factory version. All rectangular and monolithic. Again, the yellow is a smidge messy, but just like Brawl, it pierces through. The torso it sits atop is massive, all muscular and steroided up. It's also really flat due to where it ends up on the bottom of the truck mode. But you know, size of this thing and all, it's fine and it makes sense. Plus, I'm a little biased anyway. Always preferred the toy style chest. I really like how solidly the backpack comes together. It just isn't going anywhere, and it blends perfectly with the design. Other companies would have totally fudged this section. Hell, the same conglomerate already kinda did. Good to see them give this some TLC. The limbs are unfortunately a bit simple, though it is impressive how many panels fold together to make these blocks. I would have personally preferred some more detail, but I get the look they were going for. I do like the army green on the side. In any other context, it would look like puke. But here, I think it works pretty well. And it is hilarious that they even got the fake little wheels on the inside. That's the kind of faux parts usage on Sunbow characters I like. It's adorable, and it really brings him to life. Not that he needs it, the posing is fantastic. While the design is a bit mediocre, injecting it with excellent posing really helps give this guy personality. Again, I've seen the complaints about the lack of a butterfly joint, but on a Legends figure, is it really that necessary? Especially since combiners are essentially triple changes. Like, come on, have some perspective. Seriously though, he poses excellently. I have no complaints in that department. He even has nice and solid ankles to keep the backpack weight in check. And they serve double time as tabs for the combined mode. That's pretty cool. Interestingly, they also seem to have improved one of the biggest articulation gripes I've had with Magic Square, detachable hands. See, this is fine on a figure that has alternative finger options, but if it's just the bog standard fists, yeah, no, these should remain pegged in. And they've sort of fixed it. For any figure that doesn't use ball joints, they've got this sort of semi-clip that'll fall out with a hyper-specific angle, but it's so rarely used that for all intents and purposes, it remains in. I still think that using a metal pin would have been a better idea, but like many elements in this set, it's a step in the right direction. And hey, it's a nice thing being vindicated like this. Much like the trapezoidal tab thing, I can't can't count how many people have called me dumb for criticizing this choice. And now they fixed it anyway. Sorry for pointing out flaws on a figure, I guess. For issues beyond personal preferences, I think the combination hinges on the shoulders should have been sturdier. It sometimes makes posing the arms a bit annoying, but only really sometimes. That's about it. He succeeds in what he's trying to do quite well otherwise. Perhaps what he's trying to do is a little for my tastes, but I still can't call him a bad figure. The robot mode aesthetic isn't really where it's at. It's the vehicle mode, engineering, and articulation. That's where he truly excels, and that's where I truly enjoy him. And that's okay. I'd still put him in the fantastic figure camp. So he's well worth the purchase. And then, hello Whiplash! Much like my attraction, we're swinging right from one way to the other because Swindle is Addressing the elephant in the room, yeah, his face just up and vanished. Sometime while writing and recording, it just teleported into the same crevice all of those lost missiles go. Now, a professional reviewer would push this back and wait an extra month to order a replacement, but I am not a professional. I am an angry Aussie who has already had enough of this thing. The rest of the set ranges from fine to absolutely lovely anyway, so I'd rather not push back the rest and have to wait any longer. Next time, I'll just make sure to split it up like the Menasor video, though, because this was a mistake. But yes, Movieverse Prime got to him, and I told you so. I have been criticizing this for years, and everybody thought I was crazy. See, Magic Square does this really stupid thing. Key parts are rarely glued in place. They just sit there and come off at a second's notice. From the very beginning, this is why I've criticized them for using simple friction pegs for fists and heads, because these will go missing. You might not even realize it. One day they'll just be gone. I criticized their first release for it and people thought I was crazy. I criticized their later releases and people laughed. I criticized Ragnar for it and people thought I was stupid. I criticized Menasor for it and people told me I was being way too harsh on something inconsequential. Even Brawl had the issue where the midriff piece just fell out randomly if you push the torso hinge out too far. But I figured maybe I was being too harsh. It can't be that bad, right? And now, this. I spent 4 fucking hours moving the furniture around looking for it. And nothing! Maybe I can contact Magic Square for a replacement. I might just do that after all. But the fact that it just vanished, Jesus Christ, it has me down. My stance remains the same. If you have an important piece, glue it in place, you idiots! This is what happens when you don't. He was standing on a shelf this whole time, and now the piece has probably been vacuumed up and thrown out. And this isn't even the first time something like this has happened. Sideswipe had the same issue, and that piece was lost for 3 months before I found it again. Though something tells me this one isn't coming back, which oofed, not good. You know, recently I've been a little bamboozled. A lot of people have been criticizing Legacy United Vector Prime, and I've been sitting here wondering what the they're on about. Talk about one of the most stylish releases of the trilogy. Yes, enhanced with upgrades, but still a fantastic core that warrants upgrading in the first place. There's no way build quality issues could ruin the whole experience, right? Well, now I get it. Now I understand how it feels. Now it somehow makes sense. To have such a detrimental build quality issue, not to mention one I've criticized for half a decade with this company, basically ruined the whole robot mode. Yeah, no, this thing. To be fair though, Vector Prime was already a solid figure. Swindle? Yeah, no one's accusing him of that. Even beyond his shittiness, he has nothing going for him. Like, oh my god, this is just so boring. I get that it's accurate to the screen model, but the previous 2 members were able to inject some sauce into the design, and I'd argue the next 2 did as well. What happened here? Why is he so bland? Hypothetically, if I still had the face sculpts, the head would be fine, I guess, albeit a bit big in comparison to the rest of the body. I've seen complaints about the colors being way too dark, but I've never had an issue. I only take issue with the fact it's missing. But for the sculpt itself, it's just boring. Like, where's the personality? Where's the smirk? I realize that personality was brought around a lot more in the comics and later media, but Swindle is supposed to be a suave piece of shit. This head sculpt doesn't capture any of that, but the masterpiece one does, motherfucker. His torso exists. The window doesn't sit fully flush, but, you know, Legends figure and all. The faux headlights on his crotch are pretty funny, though the paint could be a lot crisper. I like the purple in the middle, but that's really the only interesting thing about it. And then you expand to the limbs, and Jesus Christ, these are just giving me nothing. Endless seas of mustard with nothing to break them up. What was once initially cute and clever fake wheels on Onslaught now look like moles clinging to the sides. Yeah, it's funny that he gains an extra pair of wheels like the Sunbow mod does, but they're just flat as a pancake. Why bother if you're just gonna do it shittily? It's just so bland. around. I get that's what the design is trying to do, but the others were able to rise above it. Why not Swindle? Not even the articulation can save him. Technically, he has the same level of articulation as the others, with a mix of how the previous two did it. So while he has the rotating ball joint of Onslaught in the shoulders, he also has the shifting hips of Brawl. So functionally, all of this should work. And yet, with how boring the visual aspect is, it just doesn't. He looks so bland in every loadout. I mean, you can't even get dynamic with the bazooka, because as well as being way too small, it only plugs into the shoulder in one specific loadout. That's it! Can't even make use of this dynamic posing because that's not how the bazooka works, for f***'s sake. Look, robot mode wise, this isn't awful. It's just boring as shit. All of this functionality and it either falls flat or doesn't work at all. Now, on a simpler figure, I'd be totally cool with it. Some figures just aren't as visually interesting as others. It's fine. My problem is that it comes off the back of one of the worst transformations the conglomerate has done. Like, it's not as bad as Ragnar or Vasily, but it's definitely in the same ballpark. All of that flipping and fighting and screaming, and you end up with something this boring in both modes. Remember, both modes suffer from this shit. You have to go through hell just to access mids. It's just so over-engineered, and you have to wonder why. The G1 toy never had issues of this magnitude, and it's overall not too difficult to engineer this alt mode in clever and creative ways. But no, a billion panels in the legs and awful clearance issues in the torso. Legends figures being fun and engaging, I guess it's all about being frustrating and oxymoronically boring at the same time. Emphasis on the moron. Like, I don't hate faux parts by any stretch of the imagination. I think they can really elevate certain engineering systems and bring back the fun factor, without designers being forced to go through a billion steps to shimmy everything around. And if you look at the other members of the Magic Square Combaticons, they use faux parts in unique and creative ways. But Swindle, not only are they flat as a pancake, but also the wheel was right there! Why did you bother? Had you just left the wheel on the side, this thing could have been far simpler, but no. Fold the wheel into the cuff and have 50 different panels reform the legs, because apparently that's the only way to do it! Christ, it sometimes feels like these were designed as masterpiece figures first, then scaled down. Oh, wait! Yeah, a good chunk of people watching this video will actually be a bit confused, because at the time of uploading, Magic Square is in the process of also releasing a masterpiece scaled version of their Bruticus, and it's all the same designs, just scaled up to full size. Now, the general consensus is that the Legends figures were upscaled into the masterpiece ones, but I'm not so sure that's the case. None of the marketing specifically refers to these as upscales, just MP versions. Then there's the fact that even at its best, the engineering is really complicated for the size. Not Legends complicated like New Age, full-scale complicated. Like a lot of it's filling in parts that wouldn't need to be filled, or removing Kibble that wouldn't matter at this scale. This is a bit tinfoil hatty, but I genuinely believe that these designs were made for Masterpiece first, then scaled down, or at the very least designed in a way where either would function. In both of those instances, it negatively affects the end product. Even in the best cases of engineering, it's like, come on, this didn't need to be this complex. I've always been an advocate for size-appropriate engineering. It's why whenever people say, "Legend should be upscaled to deluxe scale," I get a bit annoyed. The engineering is purposely designed for that scale. Why would you blow it up and have all the tiny blemishes become worse? Why would you deprive fans of a specific scale their size because it's not what you collect? You don't see me complaining that Lewin Resources Metroplex should be Voyager-sized. Similarly, I think downscaling a masterpiece figure, whether literally, figuratively, or ideologically, just leads to an incomprehensible mess where the whole thing should have been thrown out and started from scratch. Hey, wait a minute. Magic Square Bruticus has become the linchpin for those who hate Legend Scale and say all figures should be upscaled to Chug or MP. But I genuinely think it's the other way round. I don't have any concrete evidence beyond vibes and engineering styles, but I stand by the belief that these were at the very least an intermediary design, and that's led to a lot of engineering issues. And Swindle suffers from this more than any other member. Although echoes of this f***ery dance around each member, even the best ones, he really straddles with it to the highest level. Combined with either end result just not being worth it, yeah, I don't like this figure very much. I'd sooner mess with him than I would Ragnar or Vasily, but he's the member of these Combaticons I spend the least time with. I can't wave away the issues just because of his size, because like many before him, a lot of it fails because they haven't considered his size. He just frustrates me, though I'm not as angry as in other cases. Probably because it's not something where I can point to a few key areas and say they need fixing. It's more like the whole design needed to be thrown out and started from the beginning. And that disconnect makes me far less invested in him. F*** this, I need a palate cleanser. Ah, that's better. Blast Off brings the sexy back, building on that Sunbow design instead of using it as a crutch. Probably helps that his panels are a lot easier to work with. I'd even call them fun. But looks-wise, he's way better. The torso kinda leans into the flatness and the silliness, with big beefy chunks of fuchsia and stone grey. Kinda looks like he's wearing a cardigan from certain angles. He's putting on his best dress for his hubby. With the stark contrast between colours, it makes him look way more defined than it normally would. Said torso is a lot bigger than the original design, likely due to the way the engineering works, but I think it really succeeds. It weirdly gets closer proportionally to the toy version, though obviously not in details. I don't know how it would have turned out if it was smaller and more accurate. This is just better. I love how they kept the best part of the Sunbow design, the sweeping shuttle forearms. Recreating the G1 transformation on the Iron Factory version was nice, but I think these embody the space shuttle design way more. Unfortunately, the transformation does make some of the angling a smidge weird, but at least it's solidly locked in, and, well, you know. The legs are wonderful, monolithic with their stark grey panels and brown stripes. It's such a cool vibe that many versions miss, and I love the attention to detail. This is when Sunbow accuracy is done right. Right, Swindle! Even the wings are nice and solid. They blend in really well without feeling like they're unnecessarily hidden. They lock in super solidly, and everything surrounding it sucks in the remaining kibble, so it ends up working really cleanly overall. Again, it massively improves what the Iron Factory version set down, though you'd hope they would have done that in 6 bloody years. Also, you'd have hoped they'd fix the build quality issues, which fortunately they have. Thank fuck. The articulation is very much what we've seen before, meaning it's great and it works really well and it's super expressive, yada yada yada. In general, posing has been wonderful across the board. It's more so been a question of whether the sculpt work helps accentuate the articulation, and in this case, it most certainly has. He's schmoovin'. He's schmoovin' real good. I think the arm design and big beefy legs really help elevate said schmoovin'. This design could have so easily been dull and boring, but they've exaggerated just the right spots, and he ends up delivering the goods. Again, flaws are kinda minimal. The aforementioned fists for one, but also the tail fin. It just kinda sits there, never quite making use of the swivels and folds. Really feels as if it wants to fold into the leg like the rest of the kibble already does, but it just isn't able to. At least you can remove it if you want to. It's parts forming, but it's also entirely optional. I tend to make use of this in the combined mode, but in robot mode, I guess it's fine. And finally, the head sculpt again. The sculpt is fine and the helmet goes hard, but this combination of light grey and wispy purple just makes it feel undercooked. I reckon a sharper shade would have helped bring this to life a lot more effectively, but ah well. Ultimately, he's still a damn fine robot. Probably not the best of the set, but most certainly up in the higher half. There's not particularly a lot to say about him because he's very simple, however, simplicity can sometimes be really effective. It's just, when you're dealing with figures of such high quality, sometimes he looks a bit inadequate by comparison. He is fantastic in his own vacuum, but in the team, he's just damn good, which is still really good. Unfortunately, we do have to take it down a notch though, because even in the standalone figure vacuum, Vortex is just okay. A lot of it boils down to the differences in modes. You've got a fairly well-rounded vehicle mode and a fairly square robot mode. Logically, you'd think this would mean Kibble. I mean, it's how combiners function. But no, they've been insistent on keeping everything shoved inside the torso, because it has to look immaculate from every single angle. As if backpack Kibble is indicative of a disease melting their insides to pieces and ruining everything. In essence, the torso folds inside out into a great big plank of nothing. Sunbow Vortex isn't a particularly complex design, just a few indents here and there, and hey presto, you're done. But when you add all of these seams and extra panels, it just results in random mush, like mum's spaghetti slooped all over it. It's so busy that it ends up blurring together when, like, one panel would have been enough. Ironically, the sides of the torso are far more interesting, with the way they continue down to the waist with the extra windows. Guess it's because they don't have a gazillion panels holding them together. What a novel concept! The head that sits atop it is fine, but it's missing a lot of paint. This right here is the toy/IDW version, where they've molded the head in turquoise. Consequently, however, they've missed the mouth plate due to accuracy. I feel this is a misstep. Without that definition, he really stands out against the other members. Even the Tomb version misses the mouth plate paint, which is weird because the Sunbow design actually features a lighter shade of grey on it. It just feels like the head is missing something as a result, but hey, at least they painted the back of the head like the Toon, even though you'll never notice it. All this focus on the back, yet nothing to stop Vortex himself being mid. Priorities, people, priorities. Oh, and the head is only pegged in, so it comes off somewhat easily. Come on, I thought we were through this! The arms at the side are okay. They'd probably be pretty bland if it weren't for the thruster shaping on the forearms and the extra large macchiato cups on his shoulders. Only one of those bougie baristas that makes cups slightly taller instead of genuinely larger, and for some reason it costs $10. I don't even drink coffee, and even I know this pain. One neat bit of functionality is that you can untransform the forearms into their thruster configuration, going full GoBots on the opposing squads. Unintentionally, unconventional, but quite fun. As for the legs, they're alright, I guess. They have some really cool elements, such as the panels at the front. They're super clean and cover up the helicopter mass quite well. But like, did we really need this much helicopter mass inside there? The engineering and consequent messiness on the inside of the legs just makes the whole thing feel like it wasn't worth the hassle. He's sort of Swindle light, enjoyable overall, but suffering from the same sort of overcomplication. I mean, just take a look at the backs of the legs. The amount of panels used to get these to look clean and smooth is utterly mental. And they've even gone to the trouble of painting these things properly. But I have to ask, who displays their figures from the back? Who's gonna pay attention to this sort of thing? Why bother? Doesn't apply to the folding blades though. That's something I feel all Vortexes should implement going forwards. Articulation, yeah, it's great again, but much like Swindle, it's hard to make this guy look dynamic. Not impossible, mind you, but definitely far more difficult than most instances. The GoBot guns help, but even then, when you have a great big grey block of nothing marred with a gazillion panels that could have just become Kibble, a lot of this becomes mediocre. He didn't need this much engineering, this much folding. It's almost like they took a masterpiece transformation and shrunk it down, focusing too much on outward looks. Oh wait! I don't hate this figure by any stretch. Helicopter mode is alright, and the engineering thankfully pulls back before it gets to Swindle levels. In terms of minor gripes, it's the head, the annoying split in the window Kibble on the side, which looks super ugly, and that's it. But on the more fundamental level, I again think this needed to go back to the drawing board. I have no doubt that Swindle and Vortex will make fantastic masterpiece releases, but just as you shouldn't upscale a Legends figure to full size, you shouldn't downscale a masterpiece figure to Legend size, which I genuinely believe they did. It's marred the whole set, even at its best moments, and although Vortex isn't the worst instance, he's kinda missing the point of the scale. But as a team, I'd still say these do alright. You've got 3 fantastic members, 1 mediocre one, and 1 shit one. But even then, I've seen way worse. They all fit together aesthetically really well, aside from Swindle, and you're compelled to mess with them and switch them back and forth, also aside from Swindle. One frustrating member of a combiner isn't going to ruin everything, and on the whole, I think the individual bots still do way better than their Iron Factory counterparts, even though I still love those lads to bits. Sure, they may be playing on easy mode as none of them have the potential to snap in half, but if you're getting these for standalone robots, they'll probably do you alright. Combination mostly works. There's a lot of interesting steps at play. It's not as good as their Menasor, I think that was way more engaging, and a lot of parts do kind of fight you along the way, but all in all, that's fine. You basically want to have Vortex and Brawl in vehicle mode, and mostly everyone else in robot mode. Mostly given the way the Swindle works, although I've half transformed him just to make things a bit easier, because I am not doing the whole thing on camera. Fuck that. Brawl is really simple but really effective. You retract the turrets, rotate it around, and it'll actually clip into place nice and solidly. Then you open up the foot cavity. So yeah, Brawl's basically attaching upside down. I think that's a really interesting way to do it. It allows him to keep his mass, but also keep the turret on the kneecap. Really nice effects. Anyway, after disassembling the whole base mode, you basically want to attach these to the legs first, because you do have to move things around. There's a slot there and a thing that it clips onto there. So you just open the legs slightly. You may have to undo the turrets, bring it all together, clip, and push in, and that's done. Then you got the slot there, and you got the foot there, and it all comes together there. Then you take the ramp, which becomes the back of the leg. This section rotates and goes there and clips into there. Needs to remain flush for the base mode, but it becomes the back of the leg like so. 2 slots here, and 2 tabs here, 2 tabs here, 2 slots there. All clips together and locks into place, rock solid, like so. Nice and easy. Swindle is a little more annoying. Basically, you have to half transform him, move some things in, and then collapse him around the combiner Kibble. He's very similar to Scrapper on DX9 Hulky with the way that works, and I've never liked combinations like that. Another thing I hate Swindle with. You want to take the wheel and shove it into the torso like you would for robot mode. Just make sure it's sitting fully flush, but don't fix up everything yet. First thing you want to do is collapse Swindle around the foot like so, because that makes sense. Then you want to make sure this panel is facing up, which is why you need to untransform all of this, because that is actually where the leg will slot in. And then you need to finagle everything back into place. Swindle couldn't even combine properly. I really hate this thing. It's just a pain in the ass. Even the wheel gets stuck there, the steering wheel. Everything's just got to line up exactly. And once it all gets into place, you finally get it in there. Eventually, it should get in there, and everything pegs into place. God damn, it's way more difficult than it should be. And yeah, just make sure to leave that towards the back there. And eventually, you're done. Also, you want to make sure this is not up like that. It just sits flush against there to make a nice leg. Thankfully, the worst of it's behind us now. We don't have to deal with that shit anymore. Onslaught basically transforms like a more complex version of Motormaster. go. He folds up into a cube, and it works quite well. Essentially, you open up these parts and bring them back. That'll allow you to separate it and bring it all down. The arms use their hinges and come up like so. You've got dedicated hinges that pull out and rotate downwards, which does cause issues with the robot mode articulation, but it's fine for now. You bring these panels into their vehicle mode configurations and then rotate the whole thing around. That will allow everything to sit flush. Then you can use the double hinges to bring everything solidly together. The fists also rotate around here to give enough clearance to the backpack, and then this whole thing rotates around to the back, with these bits rotating upwards and these tiny little panels locking them in place, just like so. It does seem a little bit flimsy for now, but it will make more sense later when other parts actually lock into everything. You basically want to half untransform the legs, bringing this section up, but you want to have this section up instead and rotating inwards on itself, so that we can remove the foot in and get it in a place without losing the heel spur. Then this can fit back nice and solidly there. This still rotates solidly onto the top, and this actually pegs into the foot as well as the side now. The reason we're doing this is because this will become the hook that hooks onto the backpack. It's a deceptively silly step. I mean, why would you go through all of that trouble? But really, what it accomplishes is very clever. They've really stepped up their game since Menasor. Maybe they stepped up their game with the Devastator as well, but I don't have it, so I can't say. Anyway, once that's done, you want to rotate the waist around so that we get access to that slot for the combined mode. Then the legs rotate around to the sides like so, which orients these joints that pull out and rotate up, allowing you to slot that into the side like so. And also peg onto there. There's pegs there and slots there, so it all becomes nice and solid. Finally, a solid backpack on a combiner. I've been waiting for this for a very long time. Anywho, you do want to make sure this is all lined up as well. You make it nice and neat and tidy now, so that doesn't cause any issues in the full combined mode later. Anywho, you want to make sure that these are fully rotated around, and then that locks up there, also locking the leg into place. Really nice way to give extra cannons for the combined mode. You can then extend them, although chances are they'll probably depress back into the body later. You take this guiding rail here and that slot there, and it all comes together like so. And then you take the torso, and then you got that peg that goes into that there, that peg that goes into that there. More pegs, more everything. The whole thing works. It sits on the front of the robot and keeps everything nice and solidly in place. This guy is solid as a rock. Again, they've learned a lot from their Menasor. Anywho, you've got a tab there and a slot there, and that pretty much makes sense. Same on the other side. And then this also has tabs and slots, and it all goes over the top like so. Should peg into place nice and solidly with the head rotating around. And then you can pretty much already guess how the chest works. Hooray! Bruticus almost done, just the arms left. Vortex is kind of weird, because half of him has to transform, but the other half has to remain the same. Basically, what you want to do is untab this section from here, and untab that section from there. It'll all come back together later, but first off, we really just need to get this section out from there, so that we can access the combined forearm. You don't actually need to get much of it done, you just bring these panels down, like so. These will just come up temporarily, allowing you to rotate these all the way, like so, and then you can bring these back again, because they'll sort of become combined mode details, sort of not, depending on which loadout you have. You also want to take this section out, open up, and sort of get these side tabs into their robot mode configurations, but don't go all the way. So just keep these two tabs out, but then collapse everything else again. Make sure you also keep these sections up, and everything will just slot into the sides there. I keep forgetting to leave those sections out and have to go back and fix them, and you can sort of see why they painted the backs of the legs in robot mode. There's a reason for that. This section will rotate downwards and just sit there. Then you can bring in the fist, and you can see how this all lines up on that side, and lines up with this section on this side. Also, it goes without saying, but you can't have the gun in there for this. The helicopter gun needs to remain out for this mode. So it pegs in there, and slots in there. Side panels clip in there and keep it nice and locked in place, and then you can bring down these panels to the side here. So glad they actually let you do that. That was one of my biggest gripes with the legs in robot mode. Oh well. Then before you get the rest of this, you need to kind of attach it, but to do that you need to untab this section from there. You'll notice that the landing gear section, when it rotates out, you need to keep the landing gear up like so. It's got the slot there for the combined mode. This will slot into the side there, nice and solidly, and then you can finally get everything back into place into its helicopter configuration, as you would the other way, with this just sitting there, and this going back into its helicopter configuration and sitting on there, but without tabbing into the forearm like it usually would have. And there we go, finally. And of course, you can bring back the lovely collapsible blades that are so good, and I want every Bruticus to do this going forwards. Also, I just realized this isn't fully pegged in. There we go, nice and solidly. We got there, eventually. And last but not least, Blast Off. The reason we have Blast Off in robot mode is because the legs actually collapse pretty much. They go through a pretty complex transformation that is is still fun. Yeah, it's kind of weird. They stay this way for shuttle mode, given how long it is, but then they collapse for combine mode. I think that's really clever. I guess we'll do the legs first, just because the rest of this has to peg into there when it transforms. I personally just get rid of the fin at the back there. I know it's extra parts forming, but it's a parts forming combiner anyway, so what are you really going to do? You bring the feet out just so we got some more clearance. On the same hinge that brings the wings out, you can now bring these sections open and also untab the backs like so. Yeah, trapezoidal tabs, but you can barely see them in most modes, so it's fine. And it looks like an absolute mess, but really you don't have to do a lot with this. This doesn't even need to rotate. You take the foot and use the double hinges to collapse it into the body, sort of like so. You take this double hinge and collapse that into the body, then you collapse that, and then you collapse the leg again. So now it's gone to a very short, stumpy leg. It seems really complex on camera, but it's actually surprisingly simple. Most of these extra joints you're seeing are purely for the vehicle mode. You don't have to engage with them at all. It's not Swindle. It's definitely not Swindle. Anyway, once that's done, you can peg the legs together, and then you sort of half transform the top half, but leave some key parts out. Really, the key part you're going to leave out is don't fully transform the backpack. You can get it into place like so, but make sure you leave it bent and ready to go later. But the rest just transforms as per usual, with its rotating hinges and shuttle arms and all of that stuff. All of that lovely blast-off goodness. I really do like blast-off. I think the more I mess with him, the more I end up liking him. I know I've been a little bit critical and a little bit dismissive of him in this video, but no, I quite like him. Anywho, this is all ready to go, but we're not going to do it just yet, because this is where the combination happens. You'll notice this is facing downwards, and you've got this tab here. That could have been used for the gun as well, but unfortunately it just wasn't. This slides upward into that, and you need to make sure you give it a good push, because the tolerances are very tight. You can then transform that back into place. Make sure you've actually got that little bit done, because I almost forgot that. Bring everything together, like so, and once it collapses, it's nice and solid. There's a lot of tabs that need to get in the way and fix themselves as well, but once you get there, it works pretty well. And then last but not least, the fist basically works the way you'd think, with tabs and slots and all that stuff. Only one way it goes on, so it's pretty self-explanatory. So yeah, in the end, not the best combiner I've ever combined. It's definitely a little bit fiddly in certain areas, but it's far from the worst either. I think a lot of this could have been simplified, maybe if it was originally designed as a Legends combiner to begin with, but for what we get, it's fine. What did I tell you? Of course the cannons are gonna depress into the body itself. Is Marvin the f***ing paranoid android? What did you expect? At least it's still sturdy, even when he's a bit back heavy or a bit weirdly placed. He'll still stand very solidly. I don't think there's a combiner that stands this well in my collection. Good on you, Magic Square. You've done okay. And here he is. After essentially 2 years, the massive combines mode finally stands before us. And he's good. Really good. But not perfect. In a lot of areas, Magic Square has made strides for functionality, better articulation, better stability, better proportions. But in others, it feels like they've regressed. He's definitely got the looks though, especially from the front. He looks fantastic. Not to say he looks bad from the back, it works fine for the most part. It's just the front is where they put the most effort in. The head sculpt is pretty good. It's definitely a bit bigger than most combiners go, proportion-wise. A classic Sunbow hallmark. I think I prefer the proportions on Iron Factory, but for the actual sculpt work itself, there's no contest. It's just sharper and crisper and taller and meaner. Hey, no depressing head crests. That's kinda neat. Do wish the grey was shinier though, closer to the toy than the toon. The head did come with the toy/IDW style Vortex, so I don't get why they went this route. Same with the diaper, make it darker or make it pretty shiny, but doing this just feels a bit lacking. At least it's better than Games Workshop Grey though. The arms are very simple but very effective. Just big old chunks of vehicles with a split down the middle. They really make use of the monolithic shoulders, giving him an incredibly powerful silhouette. Said silhouette is aided by the new cannons, exclusive to this specific mode. They're tabbed in fairly solidly at the back, not quite as solidly as Iron Factory's attempts, but compared to the competition, they're doing okay. For the most part, Onslaught stays reasonably secure in the torso armor, but that's predicated on everything being lined up properly, especially the robot thighs. There's sadly no guiding tabs, so you sort of just have to hope you've gotten them right, lest you end up with them jostling out. Just to be safe, it's probably best to be careful when accessing the ab crunch. The forearms are a bit weird. They technically work in two different ways, but one of them is the clear intended method. With the side of the vehicles facing forward, they get a dedicated hinge that gives you a good level above 90. It works okay, and it's probably why they spent so much effort getting the backs of Vortex legs right. Not sure why they went to all this trouble when the fist and part of the forearm was going to be a parts-forming piece anyway, but that's what we have. However, if you rotate them 90 degrees, you can access some much cooler detail formed from the legs of the robot mode. This looks awesome, and I love the proportions way more, but then you have to rely on the ball joints clashing with the compressed leg bits, leading to an elbow below 90 degrees. Minorly in Vortex's case, and significantly in Blast-Off's. This is intentional, it does show up on some of their product photography, but it definitely doesn't feel like it. One method clearly has more effort put into it than the other, and honestly, ensuring both options were done well would have been nice. Though, maybe before that, they should have secured Vortex's forearm, because the hinges on this can come undone if you're rough with it. Without locking tabs, I'm a smidge worried both this and the backcannons will fail one day, but they seem to be doing alright for now. At least they'll be more sturdy than Iron Factory Blast Off. The thighs, at least the toy version, work quite well, and the leg components below are solid as a rock. Roll basically being upside down is a really neat trick, allowing them to shift the turret without requiring a whole other mechanism. After the annoyances with Iron Factory, it's a very nice change of pace. They also don't get in the way of the articulation thanks to the extendable knees. They get out of the way pretty well. In fact, the articulation is done mostly fantastically. If you're willing to detach a few pieces, you can even access a butterfly joint. Haha, take that, Zeta! Way more solid and it's better articulated. The toe pivot also does surprisingly more than you'd think. Normally it's just sorta there as a consequence of however it transforms. In this form, however, it can actually give him some really cool dynamic poses. Even if canonically combiners don't really dance like that. They more so just hulk over the battlefield, then get their asses kicked by another combiner and everyone cheers and goes home. God, imagine a combiner fight as a kaiju level threat, with everything low angle and super powerful. Oh, right, I guess that was a thing. The one part of the articulation I don't like is the fingers. They're sort of oddly shaped. They do that thing where they look more like sausages than fingers. I find it better when robots go on the boxier side of articulated digits, but they're still not bad. Sure, Iron Factory did theirs better, but they also didn't have outward rotation, so that's a plus. I don't have a lot of gripes with this design overall. Most of them are minor, such as Swindle buckling a bit around the combiner joint. Couldn't even pull his weight in combine mode. Please. But other than that, not much to discuss. Except the release strategy. It's not about this all secretly being a downscale of the eventual MP versions. No, no, no. It's instead a complete inversion of what I loved about the previous Menasor. Take this torso. It's toon-styled, right? It looks lovely, doesn't it? I ended up going with the toon-style torso because I already have Iron Factory for the silver toyetic chest. But then, maybe I want the toy thighs or the toy everything else. That should be easy, right? I mean, hypothetically, what's actually different between each release? Well, apparently enough for Magic Square to release two different versions of each figure. Yes, indeed. Instead of just packing in alternative accessories, Magic Square decided to offer two different versions of each figure. The Toon style and the IDW style? Okay, they call it IDW, but it really doesn't line up with that aesthetic at all. It's more G1 toy style, but even then, a lot of liberties are taken. Most of them are still the wrong color, they still feature cartoon-accurate heads. In fact, for the most part, the changes are so minor, they'd be better off just packing in both versions of the accessories. So, instead of giving you options, they're basically locking you into one aesthetic or the other. Even mixing and matching is discouraged. I wanted to go for the Toon style torso with the toy style in a frame. And now there's no waist piece to cover up the extra tabs. How dare I want to mix and match? I'm a bloody psychopath. And the thing is, it's really confusing which is which. Because the third-party names are so long and because the versions look so similar, I've heard of many cases where collectors have accidentally bought the wrong one. Hell, I don't even have to go far for it. It happened to me. I accidentally bought the toy style Onslaught, thinking it was the Toon version. In fact, it's very possible I bought Onslaught before Brawl, but just didn't realize until I was halfway through this video's script that I probably only counted the second spreadsheet version. But whatever, f it, we're sticking with the order. What actually are the differences between Onslaughts anyway, beyond the combination accessories? Well, you've got differences in the eye color, slightly less paint around the bumper section. That's literally it. This did not need to be a separate release. An alternate head would have done fine. Seriously, if it's basically just the accessories and some minor paint applications, why not just use swappable parts like Menasor, or Robo Paradise Soundwave, or Iron Factory Megatron? Why not just include all the different accessories in the pack? Oh, that's too expensive? What, you couldn't just release a separate toy-style accessory pack later down the line for those who want to go for a different look? What, that's not possible? Except MMC already did that with their Bruticus, and an independent upgrade kit manufacturer is already making their own for this one. This isn't that hard, just give people options. This might seem like something completely worthless. Why would anyone give a shit when most collectors just buy exactly the same style, stick it on a shelf, and then call it a day? Well, here's the thing. Magic Square Menasor is my favorite combiner of all time. It was the toy that just kept on giving. At every point, something new would be discovered. A new awesome engineering technique, a new piece of mechanical detail, a new combination system. It's a toy that gave you options, and as such, it became the definitive legend scale Menasor. If you wanted a style of Menasor, they did it. they let you do it. And it wasn't just that, their Devastator, for all its faults, did the exact same. And then there's evidence that this was the intent here too. The thigh panels actually remove, much like Menasor. Maybe they intended for parts to become swappable at some point, but it's been gimped of that. Not gonna lie, I kinda would have liked to try out the Toon-style thighs with those tiny little faux wheels. Great attention to detail. But instead, we've got two virtually identical releases with minor paint app changes. And if you wanted to mix and match accessories, you had to buy it twice, or 3 times. Because now we have a super duper accurate version as a special edition, released less than a year after you already wasted your money on this version. God, now I know how G1 has felt when Earthrise hit after Siege. It feels targeted, and it feels scummy. Ah well, what is there to do but shake your fist at the sky with your puny ass gun? Why is this the only accessory it comes with? What, you couldn't give us something beefier? This right here is textbook accurate to a fault. You can't even make up for it with shockwave compatibility. Doesn't work, not baked in. You get nothing. You only get what they let you have. That's a shame. This is by no means a bad combiner. Most of what it's doing is great. It's sculpted reasonably well, it's solid as a rock, the articulation blows the rest of the competition out of the water, and he feels like Bruticus, even more so than Iron Factory. And is it better than Old War Giant? Absolutely, no contest. That thing is pretty good, but there are aging issues with it simply not present here. However, is it a top tier combiner? Sadly, no. It's a case where it just isn't more than the sum of its parts. It feels like they keep making steps in the right direction, but then stupid decisions stop them in their tracks. The biggest faults are easy to see. Inappropriate engineering for the size, materials that are better but still not quite there, and removed functionality that made the previous combiners of theirs so amazing. If you want a Bruticus in your collection, you'll be satisfied with this, but don't count on it to blow you away at every point. Maybe upon first combining it will, it actually did for me, so much that I misspelled the post as Menasor, but after a while, you start to notice the cracks, the poor decisions, the corporate greed. This is why I don't usually like to review figures right after I get them. Sometimes opinions settle over time, and occasionally the honeymoon phase ends. Even now, writing this, I'm taking it off the best of 2024 list in combined form, and replacing it with an individual member. Who that member is, you'll just have to wait and see, but the combined mode just isn't there, I'm afraid. Though, to be honest, New Age Devastator wasn't either, so no harm, no foul. With Menasor, I still don't see any other company beating it as a whole package. With individual elements, sure, but as a combiner, it's basically everything I could ever want. But Bruticus, not so. There's a lot of areas they could improve upon. Only they probably won't, because instead of focusing on the lacking functionality, most of the conversation always defaults to combiner skeleton bad. I'm not going to bother going into it, as I already have a full mini-series explaining why I think it's beneficial. That's not why I'm a little disappointed in this. For me, it's that they've taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Everything is either a little better but not quite there yet, or gutting the final release so they can make extra cash off multiple releases. It's still a really good set, and individual elements of him are great, it's just the end result stings a little bit. But as always, fan of public consciousness is a conversation, so drop your thoughts on Bruticus below. Do you think the way this was released was justified? Does it even matter in the end? Was every Legends combiner recently a piece of shit because it uses the combiner skeleton? I see the comments, apparently combiner skeletons are like the bane of everyone's existence. Jeez. Well, the bane of my existence is time, because I don't have a lot of it. For those not aware, this video was supposed to be part of the 5th sort of annual Legendary Marathon, a celebration of things small scale. 25 mini reviews, 6 full reviews, or at least that was the plan. Fact is, this ballooned into a script about as long as Zeta Superatron Mini. As a result, things have slowed down. The marathon will continue, just in a short while. So not quite tomorrow, but when we return, we're getting back into the mini reviews. Yes, indeed, we're taking it back to an old episode and re-examining Legends class royalty. Do you remember the days when our worlds were in danger? I sure do, but that's something for late January. So until then, as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time, whenever the f*** that is.